This is just a brief presentation from one of our sponsors, Tolemi. So we're very pleased to have you involved in this conference. Michael Saminsky, who's a data engineer with Tolemi, and Sam Wells, who's neighborhood stabilization coordinator with the city of Albany. So thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So I am a data engineer from Tolemi, and with Sam, we're going to be talking today about using data to fight distressed properties.
So I'm Sam Wells. I'm the city's neighborhood stabilization coordinator. I started a couple years ago thanks to the Zombies 1.0 program funded by LISC. So thank you, LISC, and the Attorney General's office. My job is mostly to track and address vacancy and vacant buildings across the city of Albany, but we've also been doing a lot with occupied properties as well, with the thought being, tomorrow's vacant properties are often today's blighted occupied properties. But we'll talk more about that.
Tolemi is a civic technology company that's working with more than 15 cities and towns across New York State. Our mission is to help local governments build stronger and more sustainable communities by leveraging data to support evidence-based decisions and efficiently allocate resources. Our building block software is a mapping platform. It consolidates, cleans, and updates data from across every department for easy, fast reports and analysis on properties, neighborhoods, owners, and more. So as a data engineer, not only do I work with Sam in Albany, but folks all over New York, in North Tonawanda, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Newburgh, Rochester, Syracuse. And I'm kind of in a unique position. I'm not only responsible for wrestling data out of some pretty antiquated systems at times, but also thinking about how to display those data in a way that helps folks like Sam get the insights they need to be better at their jobs. When I'm successful, I'm able to connect technical with practical. So governments are just sitting on a ton of data that can be incredibly useful in building stronger communities and making things run efficiently, effectively, and equitably. These can be building data, assessor data, utilities, public safety, things like that. But it's really hard to access these data sets as they are, and there are technical challenges in linking data together. They don't always speak the same language, and that's where Building Blocks comes in. And so the question is, once you have all this data together in a single tool, well, now what? If you were a private company or like the Department of Development Sociology here, you would have a lot of capacity to start applying data to solve problems. But by and large, that does not exist in local governments. So capacity building is critical. And our rule number one is to meet our partners where they are. Our approach starts with understanding how the city is currently approaching distressed properties, what resources are available, and what tools are being used. It's important not to throw a city kind of into the deep end of the pool right away when it comes to using data. We start with information that can make immediate impact and then get more advanced as city staff get used to the tool, get used and comfortable to using the data. Only then do we discuss what data would be helpful to address the issue of distressed properties in each community. And we have experience with this. We've worked with a number of communities now, so we kind of help guide this conversation. Then we make sure that we're modeling the data and configuring the data in the application so that our users can get the answers they need quickly and easily. And then finally, once we've set up the application, we don't just say, see ya, have fun. We work really closely with our government partners to help them build the internal capacity to use data. And so we have a framework that we use to look at the learning curve of data usage in local government. And generally speaking, most of our customers start in one of the earlier stages. And I'll just run through this framework, and then I'll let Sam highlight some examples at each of those stages. So the first one is situational awareness. This is just having a better understanding of the current state of affairs. Then you have operational efficiency, and this is using data to save time from a task or tasks that would otherwise take considerably longer. You have resource allocation and prioritization, and this is where you derive evidence from the data to determine where you're going to allocate resources and what you're going to prioritize. We then have prevention, so this is identifying the signals of potential negative outcomes and intervening earlier to stave off conditions. And then finally, we have performance improvement, and this is where we identify target metrics that enable you to gauge the successes or failures of initiatives, then using the data to tweak operations. So I'll pass it over to Sam.
So I'm going to use Albany's live version to show some examples of those sort of 5 categories. So the first one, having situational awareness, something we do with code enforcement to ensure that code enforcement is operating as effectively and efficiently as it can, is to really try to identify our own blind spots, right? What are properties, where are properties that need code enforcement attention but aren't getting it? And there's a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to load this one up as I talk about it. You could look at, try to identify blind spots in your vacant building inventory. You could also look at occupied properties. This one is more looking at occupied properties, as we're going to be looking at properties that have received bills from our Department of General Services and have received calls from our police department, but have not received any code enforcement attention. All right, and this is more of a simplified way to do it. Obviously, there's a couple different ways to go about it, but these properties, you're looking at roughly 70 properties here that have received 3 calls from the for the police department and 3 bills from our Department of General Services for things like board ups, trash cleanups, property mowings, but haven't received any code enforcement attention. The next way we've sort of used it in a more operational capacity, building up our ability to do these things quicker and more efficiently. So one way we've done this is actually through just knowledge of what some property owners have. So this property owner, I'm going to show you an example, is a notorious college landlord. And often he has every single property under a unique LLC. And you'll see some of the 38 properties we've got linked there. The program helps us pick up on this. You can see all the times I've linked some other properties. They all use the same P.O. box, which is how the program is able to pick up and identify, hey, this might be owned by the same guy. And then at the bottom here is all of our interactions with him over the past 2 years. So you can see 205 code violations, 277 police cases. All right, these are properties that we visit repeatedly, time and time again, and this knowledge helps give us that context that we need in dealing with some of these properties, but also help to organize larger scale efforts, doing sweeps of all of his properties at once, for example, as opposed to taking individual cases to court. So another way we've done this too, or another way we've used building blocks, is to help us prioritize certain properties. So an idea we've been sort of testing out is actually bring City Hall on the road to specific blocks. And we've sort of called this the deep dive block party, right? Where we throw a block party on a section of the city, bring the entirety of City Hall and every department there, and make sure that we do as much as we can in as short a time frame for that block. So we looked at specific neighborhoods and looked for properties. This is a saved search, but we looked for properties that had police calls, code violations, bills from Department of General Services. We ended up selecting this block on North Lake Avenue. And we went there, we spent about 3 hours one evening interacting with residents. We marked somewhere near a dozen pieces of sidewalk that needed help. We trimmed about half a dozen trees. The police department had a grill there, cooking hot dogs and hamburgers. We cited roughly over a dozen properties for code violations. They were all tenant occupied, and all the tenants came out and were like, we need you to cite our landlords for this, this, and this. We brought City Hall on the road that day. And actually, so this building on the corner here, 187 North Lake, was owned by the land bank, and one of our police officers who was there that day, it hasn't transferred quite yet, one of our police officers that day actually approached the land bank afterwards and is now buying this property. So the big thank you. Adam had some of his staff out there that day helping us with this. So thank you. And then we, as Mike was saying, we've been using this for prevention as well. So one of the ones we're a bit more fond of is using this to identify properties that are rental properties but are not currently in compliance with our rental dwelling registry. So here I'm going to look at residential properties throughout the city that do not have what we call an ROP, or a residential occupancy permit. Or I'm sorry, that should be a 0. The residential properties, they do not have a residential occupancy permit, but they also are not using any star tax exemptions, right? So we can really, and just for purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to go with basic for now. Excuse me, they aren't. And then the key data set here is our police calls. And I know our police were here yesterday, police presented yesterday about linking up with other departments, right? We've been using their data. They allowed us to hook in here. And we've been sort of combing through their data. And there's an interesting subset in how they classify and categorize their data. They have a type of call for landlord-tenant trouble, right? So we have properties that are residential in nature, aren't using star tax exemptions, and aren't registered with the city, but have a police call that is tagged as landlord-tenant trouble, right? So those are rental properties, and it'll load up here, but those are rental properties that we can immediately send code enforcement out to site right then and there. We don't have to do much investigation. We have it on record. Police were there for a landlord-tenant problem. And then the last one, we've been using this also to evaluate some of the impacts our actions have had across the city. So, there's a lot of discussion both yesterday and today about demolitions. So we can look at our own demolitions that we've done. Let's take a look at our 2015 or 2017 demolitions. And we're going to look at properties within 250 feet of those demolitions. And we're going to go into our analytics tool here and look at our police calls over time. So we performed a slew of demolitions in 2017. What were the effects of those demolitions on the immediate neighborhoods, right? And so when we look over a period of time, you can see here's where the demolitions occurred. And then those are the police incidents we had in 2017. And then the next year, we had a very visible decrease in police calls to properties within the immediate vicinity of those demolitions. All right, so we can track and look at our actions and how that's impacted the neighborhood over time.
Great, thanks, Sam. Yeah, at the end of the day, this doesn't have to be rocket science, and it doesn't have to entail a wholesale overhaul of all your systems or what you're doing. There are small ways that data can make you more efficient, effective, and equitable, and we're only scratching the surface. So let me full screen this. Right, so thank you all for listening. Appreciate you guys having lunch here. If you have any questions, I'll be around till the end of the conference, and also my colleague Dan at the back of the room. Hi, Dan. Will be around too. So thank you.